there's another guy who recently left his job, bounced around through the industry. A lot of you people know who he is. Marcellus Wiley, probably know him from Sports Nation. He went from ESPN, then followed Colin Cowherd, Skip Bayless, Shannon Sharp, over to Fox Sports and with Jason Whitlock there to create a new network. They had Speak for Yourself, which is a show he was on. He was on it. I think he replaced Colin Cowherd on that show, if I'm correct. And then he was on with Jason Whitlock, now host of his own podcast, Fearless. Some people think he's a controversial figure. And then Emmanuel Acho comes on the show. And then Emmanuel had some different ideas. Emmanuel kind of wanted to be a star, and he wanted to be like super edgy and then be like the next great voice in media, which is like good for him. I like your goals. I like your aspirations. I see the vision. But Marcellus Wiley was like kind of like, I just want to be a straight shooter. I don't want to talk about all this holiday hoopla. So he leaves FS1 and then he goes on, starts his own podcast. Everyone has a podcast. We have a podcast. Shannon Sharp has a podcast. Everyone does at this point. Even Arthur Moats, former Steelers player, has a podcast. So he goes on this really weird rant about everyone he's ever worked with. And he starts out with Colin Cowherd and he's like, I always had a good relationship with Colin, but I feel like Colin thought it was weird that I would always replace him on a show because he replaced him on Sports Nation and Speak for Yourself. So he's like, some people told me Colin wasn't as nice as he could have been. But then again, I feel like Colin was just normal. So he like kind of is creating this drama out of nothing to start it. And then we get to the heavy hitter. And Marcellus Wiley basically broke the news that John Harbaugh is going to Michigan.
Jim Harbaugh. Sorry, they're brothers. Jay gets me twisted up every single time. I'm sure everyone does that too. But then this is where I want you to unleash, because we are not a fan of Adam Schefter on the show. Never been, especially after the Brady stuff and the Damar Hamlin stuff. I always thought he was just a robot. This was confirmed when Marcellus Wiley came out and said they wanted him to apologize to Adam Schefter for breaking the news that Jim Harbaugh was going to Michigan because Adam was supposed to break it, not him. Which basically exposes that Adam Schefter is a fraud, and he's not the one that discovers the news. He's not the one that happens or finds out first. He's just the guy that they let break the news.
First of all, for Adam Schefter, it shows how weak of a mind he really has and how much of an ego and kind of just like a paperless skin this man has, because you have one of your colleagues who, you know, if you're on a team with somebody, you know, especially a team as big as ESPN, I get that there's a competition there, but at the same time, you also want your friends to succeed.
Yeah.
And if you guys had a decent working relationship prior to that, you shouldn't be upset with Marcellus Wiley, who's definitely not out for your job.
No.
To report some news that he found first. As far as I'm concerned, in that kind of cutthroat industry, whoever finds the news first and reports it and it's accurate, let him have it. Let him have that victory. Marcellus Wiley is mostly a talk show host. You know, with like the Speak for Yourselves and things like that.
Yeah.
So getting upset and throwing a fit to the executives at ESPN just shows how much of a bitch you are.
Yeah.
And shows how much of a spineless coward you are. Adam Schefter, first of all, it really started for me with the Dwayne Haskins thing.
Oh my God.
That shit was disgusting.
Yeah.
One of the most disgusting tweets I've seen from a professional in that space ever.
Yeah.
And then the Tom Brady shit, ruining Tom Brady's retirement. And then even the Damar Hamlin shit, when Damar Hamlin's injury occurred, him on this, you know, when they're on the broadcast, he sounded like a robot. He had no emotion in it, didn't seem moved at it whatsoever, which if you're not moved by that particular play that occurred, you're a monster. And Adam Schefter's also proved with a number of articles written about him and a number of things that were out to be true about him, he's not human.
No. Yeah, I'm kind of waiting for him to get Me Too'd as well. But yeah, Adam Schefter, not a good look, especially when you're going to force someone like Marcellus Wiley, who's accomplished some accolades in the NFL, was a pretty decent player, not a great player, and then goes on ESPN, is one of their best commentators. I always liked him a lot. I vibe with his style, especially on Speak for Yourself. I would kind of like the goofy, poetic monologues they would do back and forth. So I always thought he had a realistic view. But that Adam Schefter situation, it just kind of proves every suspicion you thought about him. You were on it before I did. And he pointed some things out. I was like, oh, gotcha. Then the next thing I want to talk about was he just had this weird explanation with him and Max Kellerman. He was like, yeah, Max Kellerman would always talk too much on the show, which is funny coming from Marcellus Wiley. And then he was like, yeah, on Sports Nation, Max would always talk too much. And he's like, Max would always come in like the rapper and the boxer. And then he's like, one day it's like we were kind of just getting on each other's nerves, which if you spend a lot of time with anyone, you just naturally get on each other's nerves. It's like, it's nothing personal. It just happens.
Yeah.
So he's like, we're walking by the cafeteria. And I just had a feeling we were going to square up. I don't know why. And then they kind of just like squared up and kind of just looked at each other. And then it just kind of ended. And then there was nothing else to his story. And then he just told a bunch of stories that was like half drama, but there actually wasn't any drama there. And he was just kind of talking about it.
I hate to say it, but it kind of sounded like he was getting clicks because he was like talking about Cowherd. Like, Cowherd could have been nicer to me. It's like, I'm like, okay. First of all, I want to talk about Sports Nation real quick. Sports Nation was one of the best sports talk shows at one point.
Oh, for sure.
Michelle Beadle and Colin Cowherd, and then eventually Michelle Beadle and Marcellus Wiley.
Yeah.
Elite. They just mentioned something about Michelle Beadle. I have never heard of anybody talking shit about Michelle Beadle. Does anybody hate Michelle Beadle? Michelle Beadle's great. She's a queen. And then the Max Kellerman thing, it's like he's like making nothing out of anything.
Yeah.
And then the Emmanuel Acho bullshit, it's like I just feel like he's trying to gain clicks for his podcast, to be honest. It's kind of lame.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I feel like the problem I have with it is he was like, this is the reason why I left traditional media. And then he goes on and tells like all these like fake clickbait dramas that's not actually real beef. And it was kind of like, well, you wanted to get away from all this fake drama with like the eccentric, like social media quarterback takes. And then you come out here and then you just put out this whole clickbait monologue where you kind of just ramble along about a few half feuds you had with your coworkers. And then you talk about Emmanuel Acho, and he made it clear that there was no real beef with Emmanuel Acho. And he said, Emmanuel kind of wanted to be a star. I wasn't really at that place in my career, and we're kind of at a different place. But my problem's not with what Marcellus Wiley had to say about Emmanuel Acho. My thing with Emmanuel Acho is I think this is a guy who really wants it, but I feel like he just tries a little bit too hard. There's a point where it's like you just start thinking of the next big headline, like social media quarterback, and then that trends all over Twitter. And then he comes out, he has the asinine dumb take. I kind of get where he was going with, but it just came off as stupid, where he's like, I think the Raiders should bench Josh McDaniels. And it's just like, this is such a lame clickbait take where he's like, yeah, we should start benching coaches now. This is so new and edgy, where it's like, you're just trying too hard. And then Joy Taylor's in the background like, oh, that's so funny. We should bench coaches now. It's like, yeah, Derek Carr has a bad game and then carries the Raiders franchise. Josh McDaniels benches him. It's like, well, Derek Carr, to be realistic, I'm a Derek Carr fan. This season, I was severely disappointed in him. So it's like, I kind of get why Josh McDaniels benched him, but it's like, we're not out here benching coaches. And I just like, my only problem with Emmanuel Acho is just like the social media quarterback and him pretending that Tua is better than Justin Herbert. And then takes like, oh yeah, let's bench Josh McDaniels. It's just like, you got to do better than that. And then he just talks really big and is like, no, I am the smartest person in the room and no one else can tell me otherwise.
Yeah, it's the eclectic clothing and shit. I honestly don't even give a shit about the shit that he says, because I know what he's doing. It's like you see the words on the outside, but I know exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to get momentum. He's trying to get people to like him. He's trying to get people to click and get all the licks for him. So it's like I see through his bullshit, and I know what he's really trying to do. So
yeah,
I don't acknowledge it. But as far as benching Josh McDaniels, it's like you can't bench you know how you bench a coach, you fire him.
Yeah.
If you have to bench a coach, you fire him. Why would, like, you think that Bill Belichick has a bad day and they're like, all right, it's Matt Patricia's turn.
What?
It's like, oh man, Dan Campbell, he had too much caffeine, he's having some heart troubles. I guess it's Ben Johnson's turn. It's like, you know what's benching a coach is just firing them.